So yesterday, one of the participants asked about how we see.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a fascinating conversation. I'm always amazed at how you see what you see. And I know Bert Hellinger has a beautiful treatise on what it is to see. So how do you see?
How do I see?
Yeah.
So I think it depends on whether you're talking about what I see in the client versus what I see on the floor in the constellation. So when I'm with a client, I'm watching everything. So not to freak out my clients, but it's more, Bert talks about seeing as a very receptive way of seeing, not as aggressive, focusing on things, but allowing yourself to be moved by and allowing things to come to you and really attract your attention. And so I'm definitely tracking everything the client is saying, but also everything they're showing me. And I think in particular about this question, I see my client as being in relationship. So I'm not just looking at the person in front of me, I'm looking at all the relationships that person is referring to, or that are part of the story, or like who are the others that have shaped what I see in front of me right now. So it's, I guess, a kind of systemic way of seeing, trying to sense and see how the other people in that person's system have shaped the way they present to me right now. So I'm sensitive not just to them, but to their greater social relational field.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of systemic perception also comes into play on the floor when I'm looking at, a particular setup. I'm going to be seeing the whole matrix of, what's happening over here. If I do something here, how does it affect that? So it's a very different way of perceiving that's more systemic, and I think, Alison, it's very similar to the way that you see the body.
Right.
So maybe you could either riff off this or share what's different, or because there's a way that our way of perceiving, I think, is similar, even though we're working in different spheres.
Yeah.
So how do you see? What about you? Because I know I see social functionality. Mm-hmm. I think there's a way you see certain kind of functionality in the body systemically as well. And I'm always amazed at how you, with those amazing fingers, know to go right to the place where, like, you can see where you need to go. Just like on the floor, I can see, because of what's shown to me systemically, where I'm going to need to get movement in order to make things.
And that's the key, as we were talking about yesterday, is I see in terms of movement and what's not moving. So when I'm looking at bodies, which I do constantly, that's definitely my first impression is...
Well, you've been doing this since...
A body, yeah.
Bodywork for many
And
decades.
I also grew up as a dancer, so that has a lot to do with it too. So that I'm always looking at what's not moving that could move. And I'm acutely aware in my own body of what's not moving that could move, and I wish it would move.
I understand. Yeah, for sure.
So that's a big thing. So when you're looking at aspects of a dynamic or of a family and the different components of that dynamic, be they humans or other elements, I'm looking at if somebody's complaining about a problem in their upper back or in their shoulder or in their neck. I'm not just looking at that one particular place that seems to be expressing. That's the designated.
Right, it's the symptom bearer.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
it's not the problem. Just like the person, the scapegoat, the black sheep, the whatever usually isn't the problem. They're just expressing the problem. So I'm always looking at where is that coming from, and it's always, as you say, in relationship to other parts of the body. Because we humans, we just can't help ourselves from thinking about things in such a compartmentalized kind of way, at least in Western culture, and even with the body. So of course you change one thing over there, and the whole body has to either integrate it or can't integrate it in some way. So again, it's like, how can we bring the flow of movement, energy, love through the whole system?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think we share that idea that movement is life.
Yeah.
So if something is not moving, whether it's a family system, a business system, a human body, that blockage or that lack of fluidity blocks the flow of energy, blocks the flow of life.
Mm.
And so, but it's a certain kind of perception.
It is.
You know, to be able to see where something isn't moving. There's a way you have to perceive the whole in order to be able to pick up the place that's stuck.
Yes.
And so rather than, and I think we are taught from, grade school on to read that letter and then that word rather than see in gestalts and see in wholes. Mm. So I think people have either for the kind of body work that you so exquisitely do or for this kind of systemic work, they have to learn to see in wholes and relationships rather than in...
WHOLES.
Mm-hmm. Right. That holes. Right.
And holes. And where the HOLESs are.
In those others, for sure. Yeah.
Because part of what we were doing yesterday, too, is that where there are the HOLESs, there's a lack of conscious awareness,
right.
whether
there's
it's
amnesia.
in the flesh or whether it's in a family system. So, so much of this is also about how do I bring new life, new awareness into that place so that even once a dysfunctional pattern is seen on the floor or felt in the body, that the brain can actually keep that change.
Right.
And live that new pattern, that new neuro pathway or
right. So I think
that new family dynamic.
Yeah. The point that you're making is it's not enough to have insight. It's not enough to have a realization. You have to have an alternative pattern. And so when you're doing body work...
And support for that pattern.
Yeah, exactly. A way to practice it. So when you're doing body work and you help the body become more functional and recover a movement pattern that it should have, it's like a retraining has to happen. It's like first you have to find out, like, oh, I have an elbow. Like, I've forgotten. Or like, oh, we've, as a family, organized so that this person is the black sheep. We've solved the problem by shunting it on to one member of the family.
my elbow, the black sheep.
Yeah, exactly. It's true in families. I mean, it's true in families, and it's true in bodies. Like, I have a bad shoulder. You were saying the other day, I have the bad shoulder. Like, well, how did that shoulder suddenly become separated out and become bad?
Even, and particularly when it saved you the life, your life when the car was, coming through your windshield. Yeah.
Right. So once we've established a pattern, the way our brain works is it automates that. Like, we only have so much conscious capacity, and once we've learned that some kind of solution, it may not be a functional solution, but it's at least for the moment, we automate that, and so we forget about it. And so one of the first processes is in finding the stuck spots is to know that it's there, but that's not enough. We also have to provide either a family system or a physical system, another pathway, another way to work. And so that redirection, that, like I can remember how many times you've jiggled my elbow as I'm trying to figure out how do I actually move that joint now, now that I've discovered I've got it. And it's the same is true in families. It's like we have to figure out what is the new pattern and how do I integrate that? How do I make that change and how do I integrate it?
Another really interesting topic on that is cueing. And I don't think constellation work uses that term. I use it a lot in my body work because I have so many different ways of cueing the body into waking up from that amnesia. And certainly by moving people in space. It's a massive way.
Right. So by shifting the positioning, we change people's perspective. We change their felt experience of themselves in their system. So movement is certainly one of the things we do. But sentences also do this.
Yes.
They cue people to think about doing things differently, to have a different relationship with somebody.
And to find their feeling.
Yeah.
That's what
even
I
just
always...
to, one of our favorite sentences is now I see you.
Yeah.
Right? It's just to wake up, and that sentence right there is a cue of like, look, here we are. There's a relationship here. So now we can begin to explore what's possible in that. Whereas before we may have assigned people a label, the black sheep, and I'm the good girl and you're black sheep of the family, and we each have our roles, and we take care of our parents in that way, and it all sort of works for a while until we grow up and go out into the world. And then we find that label has stopped us from really being who we are, from having our full range of movement in the world as a person, and it stopped us from really exploring the relationship that could be there. So, very similar.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I just want to say a bit about yesterday. Alison and I have wanted to do this workshop for, 8 years. Since we first started, sharing constellation work together and wanting to see how the patterns in the family show up in the body. And so that's what we were exploring yesterday, is starting on the table and seeing the patterns that are there. Starting by really looking at the client with the way that I do, and then starting with the patterns in the body, and then seeing what emerges and putting that on the floor in a constellation, and then coming back to the body. And there were some astonishing shifts. People really made, the pattern that had been, the relational pattern that had formed over time. Because the more we're in a relationship, like if we have somebody who makes us feel unsafe, and we get a habit of protecting ourselves, that becomes, again, established in the body and then forgotten. And so when we put the person we were protecting ourselves from and that situation on the floor and find a way to loosen that and get movement in it again, the body can also let go of that pattern. So now we can begin to restore movement in the body as well. So we were really having a fun time exploring that relationship.
Yeah, it was really stunning how getting to the core, finding the core in the physical system, and then Jane setting up the relevant components onto the floor, and then coming back to the table. I could likely peel those muscular, the layers in the flesh and the bone, and move all these things, but it wouldn't have made the meaning that the constellation makes and shifts in people that we suspect will support, as we were just talking about, it will support those new pathways in somebody to then exponentially be able to take that change and integrate that new way of being.
Yeah. For example, we worked with 4 people yesterday.
Yeah,
I think.
It was 4. Yeah,
and so I watched. I don't know if you did this too. I watched the first person because there was quite a shift in her.
Oh my God, she looked completely different.
Neck.
Yeah.
And I watched throughout the day to see if it stayed, because we also dealt with the issue that was behind her need to change her body shape. And it was still there at the end of the day.
Still there.
So I was like, wow, there's still that spaciousness, and the movement was still there. So
yeah, and her spinal alignment was really, really
quite different.
And her whole way of
and just presenting.
Yeah.
So,
and her energy, it was really, she was like shining for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it was lovely. So we're hopeful that these are, they'll stick.
Yeah.
And they'll be something people can integrate and practice.
Yeah, I think this combination really is extraordinary. Now we need to find a way to do it for ourselves and each other.
Right. So we need clones here, so we can go to our own workshop.
Yeah, so we hope you'll join us the next time. A date yet to be determined, but this is definitely something to continue to unfold and hopefully have you come participate with us.